In the vast and indifferent belly of space, where nothing was certain but your inevitable demise, there drifted an aging habitat ship with as much charm as a rusty nail. They called it the Serendipity, though there was little in the way of serendipity aboard. It was more like a cosmic sock that had lost its pair and was now floating aimlessly in the laundry basket of the universe. Its captain, Vesper Thorn, was a man who ruled with an iron fist wrapped in a slightly frayed velvet glove. Charisma poured off him like oil from a leaky engine, and he had a smile that could sell sand to a Martian. "We're getting a signal, Captain," said Jax, the ship's comms officer and resident pessimist. His voice had the enthusiasm of a man asked to dig his own grave. "It's from Earth, but it's scrambled worse than last night's eggs." Vesper sighed, leaning back in his duct-taped captain's chair, a relic of better days. "Someone should tell Earth that if their distress signals are as outdated as their politics, they're not getting a bloody rescue." Laughter rippled through the bridge. The crew had long since given up on the grandeur of interstellar travel, opting instead for a kind of grim humor that masked their collective existential dread. "What's it say, Jax? And for the love of all that's unholy, try to drag some clarity out of it," Vesper commanded, gazing out at the black expanse, where the stars winked like liars. Jax tapped his console, fingers dancing over the cracked screen. "Something about an alien infiltration within the United Nations. Aliens, huh? You'd think they'd have the decency to start with Congress." Vesper rubbed his chin, which bristled with a week's worth of forgetfulness. "Aliens infiltrating bureaucrats. That's a bit like a cockroach infesting a sewer, isn't it?" The crew chuckled, though there was an undercurrent of tension. Aliens were the universe's worst-kept secret, whispered about in every dive bar from here to Alpha Centauri. But official confirmation, that was a whole new level of messed up. "Shall we just ignore it, boss?" piped up Mina, the tactical officer who had never met a problem she couldn't shoot. "Earth's not exactly in our neighborhood, and I'm not keen on playing exterminator for their critters." "Tempting," Vesper replied, stretching the word like an old rubber band. "But if they've managed to make it all the way to Earth without being noticed, what's stopping them from popping over for a chat with us?" Jack snorted. "I've met the neighbors, Captain. If anyone's shaking hands with aliens, it'll be them." Vesper stood up, his movement causing the deck to squeak a protest. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We don't even know if this isn't just some elaborate prank by a bored AI." "Well," Mina said, crossing her arms, "if it is a joke, they've certainly got the dramatic tension down." Vesper nodded, his eyes scanning the bridge crew, a misfit band that had somehow gelled into a functioning disaster. "Jax, keep that signal on file. We'll decide how to play it when we've got more than a drunk parrot's version of events." The crew returned to their stations, the hum of the ship's engines a comforting reminder that, despite the universe's best efforts, they were still alive. For now. Hours later, Vesper sat in his quarters, a cramped space that smelled faintly of desperation and engine oil. He poured himself a drink from a bottle with a label that had long since given up the ghost. It tasted like tar and regret, but it was the closest thing to a good time he could afford. The door chimed and Vesper groaned. "Enter, if you dare," he called out. Mina stepped in, her expression as unreadable as ever. "Got a minute, Captain, for you." "Always," he said, gesturing for her to take a seat on the only other piece of furniture that wasn't nailed down. "I've been thinking about that signal," she started, her gaze fixed on the tabletop like it held the secrets of the universe. "If it's real, and there are aliens in high places, then Earth's got more problems than a one-legged man in an ass-kicking contest," Vesper finished for her. She chuckled, a rare sound. "Exactly, but what if it's not just Earth? What if they are playing at something bigger?" Vesper raised an eyebrow. "You mean like intergalactic chess? More like a cosmic game of Risk," Mina replied, her voice low. "And if we're pieces on that board, we need to know who's moving us." Vesper swirled his drink thoughtfully. "You've always had a knack for strategic paranoia, Mina. I suppose that's why I keep you around." "That and my charming personality," she quipped. That too, Vesper agreed, setting his glass down with a thud. All right, let's say this isn't just a crock. What do you suggest we do about it? Mina leaned forward, eyes alight with a fierce determination. We find out who sent that signal and why. And then if it turns out the universe really is that screwed. Vesper finished his thought as darkly amused as ever. Then we do what we do best, survive it. Back on the bridge, the atmosphere was as toxic as ever, but at least the coffee was drinkable. Jax was muttering to himself, trying to unscramble the signal like a frustrated crossword enthusiast. The rest of the crew were absorbed in their tasks, the buzz of activity a veneer of normalcy. Suddenly, the ship's alarms blared, a sound that was less danger and more you're about to die in a very stupid way. What now? Vesper barked, storming in with Mina hot on his heels. Incoming ship, Captain, and they're not here for a friendly chat, Jax yelled over the cacophony. The view screen flickered to life, revealing a sleek vessel that looked like it had been modeled after a knife. Sleek, shiny, and about as welcoming as a lone shark. They don't look like the ambassadorial type, Mina observed dryly. Vesper grinned, though there was nothing friendly in it. Ready stations, everyone. Let's make our unwelcome guests feel at home. As the Serendipity hummed with the energy of battle preparations, Vesper felt a familiar thrill. It was the kind of feeling that told him he was still alive, for now. And as the universe had taught him time and again, for now was about as good as it got. The tension was a living thing, coiling around the bridge like a snake ready to strike. Vesper leaned over Jax's shoulder, eyes glued to the approaching ship. Any idea who they are? He asked, though his gut already had a few unpleasant theories. Jax shook his head, his fingers flying over the console like a pianist in a nightmare. Nothing on their markings, but they're packing enough firepower to suggest they're not here to borrow sugar. The ship rocked suddenly, the impact throwing everyone against their restraints. Friendly bunch, Mina commented, her voice calm like ice. Return fire, Vesper ordered, his voice a whipcrack of determination. The Serendipity's weapon systems hummed to life, spitting out a volley that lit up the void like a fireworks display. It was a beautiful, terrible sight, the kind that made you appreciate the fragility of being one of the little guys in a big, bad universe. The enemy ship dodged most of the barrage, but a few shots found their mark, causing it to veer off course. Not bad for a bucket of bolts, Mina said, a hint of admiration in her voice. Vesper allowed himself a small, grim smile. Let's see how they like a second helping. But before the Serendipity could unleash another volley, the enemy ship sent out a transmission. The bridge was filled with static, then a voice as smooth as poison slid through. Captain Vesper Thorn, I presume, said the voice, making the captain's name sound like a dirty joke. Vesper raised an eyebrow. You presume correctly, and you are. Just someone with an interest in your recent activities, the voice purred, as if they were discussing the weather rather than a potential bloodbath. Vesper exchanged a glance with Mina, whose eyes were narrowed in suspicion. Well, I hope you've brought a punchline to this little chat. The voice chuckled, a sound that made the skin crawl. I assure you, Captain, this is no joke. We know about the signal and we're very interested in what you plan to do about it. Join the club, Vesper said, still keeping his tone light, though his mind was racing. Membership's open, but the benefits are lousy. Oh, I think we'll enjoy being members, Captain. See you soon. The transmission cut off, leaving the crew in tense silence, the kind that usually preceded something very bad happening. Mina broke it with a succinct, well, shit. Vesper nodded, staring at the empty space where the enemy ship had been. Yeah, he agreed, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 bad decisions. Shit. The Serendipity floated alone once more, but now with the added knowledge that the universe was, indeed, a messed-up place. And they were right in the middle of its latest joke. With the cosmos laughing down at them, Vesper knew one thing for certain. Things were about to get a hell of a lot more interesting. The Serendipity's bridge felt like a bingo hall hosting a riot. Everyone was buzzing, but nobody knew what song they were meant to be dancing to. Vesper Thorn, captain of this charming death trap, stalked the bridge like a wolf scoping out a particularly unappetizing flock of sheep. His mind was a storm of half-formed plans and fully formed cynicism. "All right, listen up." Vesper snapped his fingers, which echoed like gunshots in the uneasy silence. Jax perked up, reluctantly pausing his attempts to decipher the alien transmission. "You've got my attention, Captain, and that's saying something. We need to put together a team," Vesper continued, ignoring the sarcasm dripping off Jax's words like oil off a rusty engine. Loxley, Zephyr, front and center. The two crew members stepped forward, each a poster child for "Don't judge a book by its cover." Loxley Vane, the ship's engineer and all-around mechanical genius, looked like he'd been assembled from spare parts. His mismatched eyes gave him a perpetually surprised look, as if he couldn't quite believe the universe was still standing. Then there was Zephyr Jet, the navigator. If swagger was a fuel source, she'd have powered the ship to the edge of the galaxy and back. Her grin was as sharp as a gamma-ray burst and twice as dangerous. "So, we're the Expendables," Zephyr quipped, crossing her arms with a smirk. "Absolutely," Vesper replied, deadpan. "But don't worry, I hear the afterlife's got great benefits." Loxley scratched his head, sending a cloud of dandruff drifting like cosmic dust. "What exactly are we doing, Captain?" "Investigating the signal. We need to figure out if it's as real as Jax's enthusiasm." Jax snorted. "Hey, I resemble that remark." "We're looking for coded messages," Vesper continued. "Anything that might point to who's playing puppet master with the universe." Loxley nodded slowly, his brain already whirring away like an overclocked processor. "All right, I can rig something up to decrypt the transmission." Zephyr leaned back, stretching like a cat that had just caught sight of a particularly tasty-looking bird. "And I'll plot us a course to wherever that signal originated. Fingers crossed it's not straight into a black hole." "Appreciate the optimism," Vesper said dryly. With a plan as sketchy as an amateur's doodle, they got to work. Loxley's tools clattered like bones being shaken in a cup, while Zephyr's fingers danced across her console, bringing up charts and diagrams that made Vesper's head spin. "How's it looking, Loxley?" Vesper asked, trying to peer over the engineer's shoulder. Loxley shrugged, not looking up from his work. "Like I'm trying to decode a love letter written by a drunk octopus." Zephyr snickered. "Sounds about right. Should I start prepping a distress signal in case we accidentally invite more unwelcome guests?" "Wouldn't be a day on the Serendipity without a little impending doom," Vesper replied, his voice dry as a bone in the desert. Time ticked by, marked only by the hum of the engines and the occasional curse from Loxley as his equipment sparked and sputtered. Jax kept an eye on the comms, muttering to himself like a doomsayer on a caffeine high. Finally, Loxley let out a triumphant whoop. "Got it. The signal's got layers like an onion or a particularly secretive mole." Vesper leaned in, eyes narrowing. And it's not just static. There are messages hidden beneath the surface, all pointing to sabotage." "Sabotage," Zephyr echoed, raising an eyebrow. "Of what?" "Everything if the messages are to be believed," Loxley said, grimacing. "Ships, colonies, entire planets. Someone's playing a very high-stakes game." "Wonderful," Vesper sighed, rubbing his temples. "Because the universe wasn't already a big enough dumpster fire." Zephyr tapped her console, her brow furrowed. "I'm picking up traces of the signal bouncing off a moon in the Epsilon Eridani system." "Could be a relay point." Vesper nodded, feeling the weight of command settle on his shoulders like an ill-fitting coat. "Sounds like we've got our next destination." Mina, who'd been listening with her usual intensity, spoke up. "What if this is just bait? Lead us into a trap and finish us off." "Then at least we'll know we're important enough to kill," Vesper replied, a crooked grin playing on his lips. Mina snorted. Comforting thought. With the course set, the Serendipity lurched into motion, engines rumbling like the groans of a particularly grumpy old man. The journey was tense, each member of the crew lost in their thoughts as they prepared for whatever fresh hell awaited them. In the mess hall, which looked more like a scrapyard with a coffee machine, Vesper found himself sitting beside Zephyr. She was munching on something that might have once been food but had since evolved into a new life form. "You think we're doing the right thing?" Zephyr asked, her voice casual but her eyes serious. Vesper shrugged. "Right thing, wrong thing. At this point, I'm just aiming for least disastrous." Zephyr chuckled, leaning back. "That's kind of your mantra, isn't it? Pretty much. Doesn't make me wrong, though." "Nope, just makes you human." The Epsilon Eridani system loomed large on the main screen as the Serendipity dropped out of FTL, the moon's cracked surface gleaming like an old coin under the harsh light of its sun. It was barren, inhospitable, and perfect for hiding something you didn't want found. "All right, people," eyes peeled, Vesper barked, scanning the moon's surface for any sign of trouble. "Zephyr, what are we looking at?" "Mostly rock, dust, and more rock," Zephyr replied, her fingers flying across the nav controls. "But I'm picking up something odd, a structure, could be a base." Jax perked up, an unusual gleam in his eyes. "Alien. Or just human stupidity. Why not both?" Mina muttered, already checking her weapons. "Let's take a closer look," Vesper ordered, steering the ship towards the anomaly. The Serendipity dipped low over the moon's surface, casting long shadows in the weak light. As they neared the structure, it became clear that it wasn't just a pile of rubble. It was an installation, buried and forgotten, like a grave nobody cared to visit. "Looks like someone tried to cover their tracks," Loxley noted, squinting at the screen. "But did a crap job of it." "Let's hope their security system is just as neglected," Vesper said, guiding the ship to a landing. The ground was rough, the kind of terrain that made you curse whoever designed space boots. As Vesper, Mina, and Loxley disembarked, Zephyr and Jax stayed behind, ready to provide cover if things got messy. "Lovely place," Mina remarked, kicking a rock that skittered across the cracked ground. "Bet the real estate's cheap," Vesper said, eyeing the entrance to the structure. It was sealed but not very well. "Loxley, think you can get us in?" "Please," Loxley replied, already fiddling with the lock. "This thing's about as secure as a wet paper bag." True to his word, the door creaked open after a few minutes of creative engineering and they slipped inside. The interior was dimly lit, corridors stretching out like the innards of some long-dead beast. Dust lay thick, disturbed only by the occasional scurrying of something best left unidentified. "Split up," Vesper instructed. "Mina, you're with me. Loxley, see if you can find anything that'll tell us what this place is." They moved through the facility with the kind of cautious dread usually reserved for haunted houses and family reunions. Every shadow seemed alive, every creak a potential threat. Vesper and Mina reached a control room, its consoles dark and lifeless. But the walls were lined with screens, each one displaying a different part of the building. "This feels ominous," Mina observed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah, but ominous is kind of our brand," Vesper replied, pressing buttons until one of the screens flickered to life. What they saw made them both pause. Rows of pods stretching out into the darkness, each one containing a figure suspended in some sort of viscous liquid. "Well, isn't this just peachy?" Vesper muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. "Cloning facility," Mina guessed, her eyes narrowing. "Or preservation," Vesper countered. "Either way, it's not good news." Loxley's voice crackled over the comms. "Captain, you're gonna want to see this." They doubled back, finding Loxley in what looked like a command center. He was hunched over a console, surrounded by screens displaying data that Vesper didn't even want to try and comprehend. "Break it down for me, Loxley," Vesper said, crossing his arms. "This place was built as a failsafe," Loxley explained, his eyes wide with both excitement and fear. "In case of planetary collapse or invasion, those pods are filled with individuals deemed important, politicians, scientists, leaders." "Great," Mina sighed. "So, we stumbled onto the universe's biggest backup plan." "And the signal?" Vesper asked. "It's an alert, a warning to anyone who finds this place that the galaxy's gone to hell in a handbasket." "Well, they're not wrong," Vesper said, leaning back against the wall. "But this still doesn't explain who sent it or why." Loxley nodded. "I'm working on that. But it's clear someone doesn't want this place found." "Then I guess it's time we make ourselves at home," Vesper stated, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at his lips. See what other secrets this dump's hiding. With that, they began the process of unlocking the facility's mysteries, aware that they were now players in a game far bigger than any of them had realized. And the stakes, as always, were life and death. But then, for the crew of the Serendipity, that was just another day at the office. Whoever built this place sure loved their cryptic messages, Vesper said, eyeing the row of screens like they might spring to life and bite him. Well, mystery's one way to keep tourists away, Mina replied, taking a cautious step back from the ominous glow of the monitors. What's next, Captain? Next, we find out who's been scribbling warnings in the universe's margins, Vesper said, rubbing his chin, and why they're using us as their errand boys, or girls, Mina added with a smirk. Equal opportunity mercenaries, that's us. Loxley's fingers danced over the console, each keystroke a tiny rebellion against the outdated tech. I can try to dig deeper into the system, but this thing's older than my grandfather's sense of humor. Which was? Mina asked, eyebrows raised. Practically prehistoric. Sounds about right, Vesper said. But give it a shot. Every secret we unlock is one less thing waiting to stab us in the back. With a nod, Loxley got back to work, his mismatched eyes gleaming with determination. Or was it mischief? Hard to tell with Loxley. Meanwhile, Vesper turned his attention back to the screens, their flickering images casting unsettling shadows across the room. Anyone else feel like we're in a low-budget horror film? Mina asked, glancing around. Not just any horror film, Vesper replied dryly. One of those so bad it's good kind. Except we're the ones who might get axed, Loxley called over his shoulder, not missing a beat. But hey, I'm sure we'll get top billing. Hope we don't end up as the comic relief, Mina quipped. We're living it, Vesper said, with a chuckle that was more bone-tired than amused. Just then the comms crackled, and Jax's voice broke through the static, sounding like he'd been mainlining caffeine again. Captain, you might want to get up here. We've got a situation that's more tangled than a politician's promise. Of course we do, Vesper muttered. What's going on? Earth sent us a little love letter, Jax continued, the sarcasm dripping like toxic molasses. Looks like our pals back home are dealing with some alien activity within the UN. Real cloak and dagger stuff, Vesper frowned, folding his arms. Alien activity. As in more than the usual bureaucratic nonsense. Sounds like it, Jax replied. They're asking for our help. Apparently we've become the galaxy's go-to-problem solvers. More like the universe's scapegoats, Mina added. How considerate of them. All right, let's see what Earth wants, Vesper decided. Loxley, keep at it here. Mina, you're with me. They made their way back to the bridge, navigating the Serendipity's cramped hallways with the ease of long familiarity. The ship, held together by little more than duct tape and determination, vibrated beneath their feet like a cranky beast that hadn't had its coffee. On the bridge, Jax was hunched over the comms console, his fingers flying faster than a politician's excuses. Here's the message, Jax said, gesturing at the screen. It's encrypted, but not enough to keep me out. They really should hire better IT guys. Vesper leaned over, scanning the text. UN reports infiltration by unknown alien entities. Increased surveillance required. Request assistance from Serendipity. He snorted. Because clearly we're the cavalry on this one. More like the guys who show up after the battle's over and loot the corpses, Mina said. Does anyone else think it's a bit too convenient we find a facility full of important people popsicles at the same time Earth starts panicking about aliens? Jax asked. His eyes narrowed suspiciously. Coincidence is just the universe's way of screwing with us, Vesper replied. Which means we should probably take it seriously. Zephyr, who'd been listening in, finally spoke up, a sardonic grin on her face. So what's the plan, Captain? We gonna play hero, or are we gonna find a nice corner of the galaxy to hide in? Tempting as a permanent vacation sounds, Vesper said. We're going to dig deeper into this facility and see what shakes out. Earth can hold its breath a bit longer. Good thing we're already in the business of poking hornets' nests, Zephyr said, turning back to her navigation console. Just hope we don't end up getting stung. That'd be too easy, Mina muttered. As Vesper considered their next move, the lights flickered ominously, plunging the room momentarily into darkness. When they came back on, Loxley's voice rang out over the comms. "Captain, we've got a problem," he said, worry threading through his words like a taut wire. "The systems are going haywire down here. Someone's sabotaging us from the inside." Vesper sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Of course they are, because one existential crisis wasn't enough." "Do we have any idea who the merry prankster might be?" Zephyr asked, swiveling her chair to face the others. "Not yet," Loxley replied, "but they are making a mess of things. If we don't figure it out soon, we might be stuck here listening to each other's bad jokes for the rest of eternity." "Wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy," Mina said, cracking her knuckles. "All right, let's find our mystery saboteur before they decide to really ruin our day." "This just keeps getting better," Vesper muttered as they headed out to the guts of the ship, leaving Jax and Zephyr to monitor the situation from the bridge. As the group moved through the dimly lit corridors, an uncomfortable silence settled over them, broken only by the distant hum of the engines and the occasional creak of shifting metal. "Anyone else feel like we're being watched?" Mina asked, her voice low. "Probably because we are," Loxley replied, his tone far too cheerful for the circumstances. "Whoever's messing with us is probably having a good laugh right now." "Well, let's see if we can wipe that grin off their face," Vesper said. "Start with the engine room. If they're trying to strand us here, that's where they'll hit first." The engine room of the Serendipity was a jungle of wires, pipes, and ominously sparking machinery. Loxley's domain, a place that looked like it could explode at any moment and probably would, given half a chance. "Looks like someone's been playing with my toys," Loxley said, examining the tangled mess with a critical eye. "I've seen tidier war zones. Can you fix it?" Vesper asked, glancing around for any sign of the saboteur. "Probably, eventually," Loxley replied. "But I'll need time to untangle this disaster." "All right, we'll give you as much time as we can," Vesper said. "Mina with me. Let's see if we can catch whoever's responsible before they make things worse." As they made their way through the ship, Mina's gaze flickered to Vesper. "You think it's one of us?" "It's a possibility," Vesper admitted, his voice grim. "But until we know for sure, I'd rather not start pointing fingers. Right now, we need to solve this before we're grounded for good." Their search took them from the cargo hold to the crew quarters, every corner and crevice scrutinized with a level of intensity usually reserved for tax audits. But the ship remained stubbornly silent, offering no clues as to the identity of their saboteur. "This is starting to feel like a wild goose chase," Mina said, frustration creeping into her voice. "Yeah, well, we better catch that goose before it lays any more eggs," Vesper replied. "Let's check the galley next. Maybe we'll have better luck there." The ship's galley was a cramped, cluttered space that doubled as a makeshift meeting room. The kind of place where you could spill your guts, literally and figuratively, and no one would blink an eye. They entered to find Jax already there, rummaging through the cupboards like a raccoon on a sugar high. "Looking for snacks or something more sinister?" Vesper asked, eyebrows raised. "Can it be both?" Jax replied, tossing a slightly suspect protein bar in the air. "Thought I'd see if our mystery meddler left any clues amidst the culinary chaos." "Find anything?" Mina asked, crossing her arms. "Other than the fact that our food supplies are about as appetizing as a kick in the teeth." "Not much," Jax admitted, his expression one of resigned defeat. "Whoever they are, they're good at covering their tracks." "Terrific," Vesper muttered, leaning against the wall. "So we're stuck with a ghost on board, and our only lead is Earth's vague plea for help." "Captain, I think I might have something." Loxley's voice crackled over the comms, a hint of triumph in his tone. "Managed to isolate a signal. It's coming from inside the ship." "Inside?" Mina echoed, frowning. "You mean someone's broadcasting from here?" "Looks that way," Loxley confirmed. "But it's bouncing around, hard to pin down. Could be a transmission to our pals back on Earth or a message to someone else entirely." "Fantastic," Vesper said, running a hand through his hair. Let's see if we can trace it before our saboteur decides to up the ante. As they regrouped in the engine room, the atmosphere was tense, each member of the crew on edge, like a pack of wolves sniffing for a scent in the wind. "All right, let's do this," Vesper said, nodding to Loxley. "Find that signal, find our saboteur." The minutes ticked by as Loxley worked, the silence heavy with anticipation and unspoken questions. The only sounds were the distant hum of the ship systems and the occasional squeak of a tool. Finally, Loxley looked up, a satisfied grin spreading across his face. "Got it. Signals coming from the aft section, near the auxiliary control room." "Then that's where we're headed," Vesper said, his expression hardening into determination. "Let's catch ourselves a saboteur." As they made their way towards the source of the transmission, the corridors seemed to narrow, the metal walls closing in like a vice. The tension was palpable, adrenaline coursing through their veins like a live wire. They reached the auxiliary control room, the door slightly ajar, casting a thin strip of light into the corridor. Vesper motioned for silence, approaching with the stealth of a hunter on the prowl. Inside, the room was dimly lit, consoles humming quietly in the shadows. And there, crouched over a terminal, was a figure, their features obscured by the glow of the screens. "Step away from the console," Vesper ordered, his voice calm but commanding. The figure turned slowly, a mask of surprise and defiance etched onto their face, a familiar face. "Zephyr," Mina's voice was a mixture of shock and disbelief. "What the hell are you doing?" Zephyr smiled, a sharp, humorless grin. "Just tying up a few loose ends." "Loose ends," Vesper repeated, his eyes narrowing. "You've been sabotaging the ship." "In a manner of speaking," Zephyr admitted, her voice light, almost playful. "I prefer to think of it as preventative maintenance." "Why?" Jax demanded, stepping forward. "What do you have to gain from all this?" "Let's just say I have other interests," Zephyr replied, her grin unwavering. "And you lot were becoming a bit of a liability." Vesper's mind raced, pieces of the puzzle falling into place with a sickening clarity. "You're working with them, aren't you? Whoever's running this show." "Give the man a prize," Zephyr said, her voice dripping with mock admiration. "So what now?" Mina asked, her fists clenched at her sides. "You gonna kill us all?" Zephyr shrugged, her expression unreadable. "Depends on how cooperative you feel." Vesper exchanged a glance with Mina, a silent agreement passing between them. "Not very, I'd wager," Vesper said, taking a step forward. With a flick of her wrist, Zephyr activated the terminal, a series of commands flaring across the screen. "Too bad," she said, her smile widening. The room was filled with the sudden blare of alarms, the ship's lights flashing red as the hum of engines intensified into a roar. "Looks like we're in for a rough ride." The roar of the Serendipity's engines was a deafening backdrop as the crew stood frozen in the auxiliary control room, the red lights casting them all in a ghastly hue. Vesper's mind was racing faster than the ship's FTL drive, and about as stable. Zephyr's betrayal had hit them like a kick to the throat, but there was no time to wallow in trust issues. The ship was about to do something very unpleasant, and they had a saboteur to apprehend. "Zephyr," Vesper began, trying for diplomacy but landing somewhere closer to homicidal curiosity. "What exactly is your endgame here?" "Board game night with aliens," Zephyr chuckled, a sound as comforting as nails on a chalkboard. "Let's just say there's a new world order coming and I'm securing a front row seat." "Good for you," Mina muttered, her fists still clenched. "Always nice to see someone chasing their dreams." Zephyr's fingers danced over the console, and another blare of alarms resonated through the metal corridors. "You should consider doing the same. We all know this ship is a relic. Time to upgrade." Vesper exchanged a look with Mina, then nodded to Jax. "Get Loxley on comms. We need that technical genius brain of his on this mess." As Jax fumbled for his comms device, trying not to drop it in his agitation, Vesper turned his attention back to Zephyr, who was now watching them with the kind of detached amusement usually reserved for bad sitcoms. "You know, Zephyr," Vesper said, casually leaning against a console he hoped wasn't explosive, If you wanted out of the crew, you could have just asked for a transfer. All this sabotage feels a bit dramatic, even for you." "Where's the fun in that, Captain?" Zephyr retorted, her eyes gleaming with a dangerous excitement. "Besides, I've always been a sucker for a little chaos, Captain," Jax called out, finally managing to get Loxley on the line. "Loxley's on. He says he's isolated some kind of alien tech interference." "Alien tech," Vesper echoed, a sinking feeling settling in his gut. "Tell him to prioritize shutting it down. We're not turning this ship into a flying coffin." Jax relayed the message, his expression a mix of urgency and caffeine withdrawal. "Loxley says it's complicated. Apparently, they've rigged the systems to go haywire if tampered with." "Of course they have," Mina grumbled, rolling her eyes. "Because nothing in this universe is ever easy." Vesper rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down like an overweight elephant with a grudge. "All right, we need a plan. Something that doesn't involve us getting spaced or blown to bits." Zephyr leaned back against the console, arms crossed, watching with a smugness that could only be described as punchable. "Good luck with that." Ignoring her, Vesper turned to Mina and Jax. "We need to figure out how to isolate the alien tech without tipping them off. Jax, see if you can find anything useful in the database. Mina, you're with me. We're going to have a chat with our guests." Zephyr's smile widened as Vesper and Mina turned to leave. "I wouldn't bother. They're not the chatty type." Vesper paused at the door, shooting her a look that could peel paint. "Oh, I'm not planning on talking." As they made their way through the now familiar corridors of the Serendipity, Vesper shot a glance at Mina. "Think we can outsmart alien tech?" "If we can't," Mina replied, a wry smile tugging at her lips, "at least we'll go out with a bang." And isn't that what everyone wants? Their destination was the cargo hold, a cavernous space filled with crates that had seen better days and better goods. It was also the best place to hide something or someone you didn't want found. "Vesper, you really think the aliens are here?" Mina asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Given our luck, probably," Vesper replied, adjusting his jacket. "Besides, I'd like to think Zephyr wouldn't go through all this trouble for imaginary friends." As they reached the hold, the door slid open with a reluctant groan, and they were greeted by the sight of nothing. Just rows of crates casting long shadows under the dim lights. "Looks deserted," Mina said, stepping inside cautiously. "Maybe Zephyr was bluffing. Or maybe they're just good at hide-and-seek," Vesper countered, scanning the room with a critical eye. They moved between the crates, the silence broken only by the soft hum of the ship and the distant clanging of something mechanical, probably Loxley trying to keep the ship from falling apart. Again. "Find anything interesting?" Mina asked, her tone laced with sarcasm. "Just a lot of dust and lost dreams," Vesper replied, stopping at a stack of crates that seemed slightly out of place. "But something tells me we're not alone." As if on cue, a slight rustling came from behind one of the crates, followed by a low, unfamiliar sound that could have been laughter or a cough. It was hard to tell with aliens. Vesper and Mina exchanged a glance, drawing their weapons with a practiced ease. "All right," Vesper called out, his voice firm. "Come on out, we know you're there." The response was another rustle, then silence. The kind of silence that stretched on, filling the space with tension as if the ship itself were holding its breath. "Fine," Mina said, stepping forward with a defiant air. "We'll do this the hard way." Vesper moved to cover her, watching as she approached the crates with a mix of caution and resolve. As she reached the edge, she peeked around, then sighed. "Nothing here but a bunch of old crates and—" her words cut off as a figure sprang from the shadows, moving with a speed that defied logic and physics. Before they could react, the figure, a humanoid-looking creature with skin that shimmered like oil on water, had Mina by the throat, holding her with a grip that threatened to squeeze the life out of her. "Well, this just keeps getting better," Vesper muttered, leveling his weapon at the creature. "Let her go unless you're looking to add some new holes to your anatomy." The creature turned its head slightly, regarding Vesper with eyes that seemed far too knowing. "You are not supposed to be here, human," it said, its voice smooth and cold like liquid nitrogen. "And yet here we are," Vesper replied, not lowering his weapon. "Must have taken a wrong turn at Alpha Centauri." The alien cocked its head, a strange gesture that might have been curiosity or disdain. "Your presence is inconvenient." "Funny," Mina gasped, trying to wrench herself free. "That's exactly what my ex said." Vesper shifted his stance, keeping his aim steady. "Look, we don't want any trouble, we just want our ship back. So how about you let my crewmate go and we can all just walk away from this?" The alien considered this, its grip loosening slightly. "Your ship is of no consequence. Our interest lies elsewhere." "Then you won't mind if we take it back," Vesper pressed, feeling the tension ratchet up another notch. The creature hesitated, then released Mina, who stumbled back, rubbing her neck with a grimace. "Thanks," she muttered, stepping behind Vesper. "Your ship will not survive without our assistance," the alien stated, its gaze unblinking and unnerving. "Good thing we've got a tech genius and a death wish," Vesper shot back. "Now beat it before I change my mind about adding new ventilation." The alien paused, then nodded slowly, as if acknowledging a point in a debate, before it turned and disappeared into the maze of crates, its form blending seamlessly with the shadows. "Well, that was enlightening," Mina said, her voice filled with forced bravado. "I never realized how much I wanted to meet a covert alien." "Add it to the bucket list," Vesper replied dryly. "Let's get back and see if Loxley's managed to unfry our systems." Back on the bridge, the chaos was palpable. Loxley was surrounded by a sea of wires and screens, tapping furiously at the console as though trying to win a particularly frustrating arcade game. "Captain," Loxley called out without looking up, "I've got good news and bad news. The good news is I think I can shut down the alien tech." "And the bad news?" Mina asked, still rubbing her neck. "You might want to buckle up," Loxley replied, a manic glint in his eye. "If this doesn't work, the ship might just decide to spin us into oblivion." "Lovely," Vesper said, sinking into his chair with a resigned sigh. The chair creaked ominously but held. "Put it on my tab with the universe." With everything set in place, the crew braced themselves as Loxley executed the override. The ship shuddered violently like it was trying to shake off an itch, and the lights flickered before stabilizing. For a moment there was silence. Blessed, eerie silence. "You did it?" Jax asked, hope threading through his voice like a half-forgotten melody. "I think so," Loxley replied, a triumphant grin spreading across his face. "But we're not out of the woods yet. The alien tech is still here, and it's not going to pack up and leave just because we asked nicely." "So what's the plan?" Mina asked, looking between them. "We need to find a way to disable it permanently," Vesper said, his mind already spinning scenarios and plans. "But first, we need to make sure Zephyr doesn't cause any more trouble." "Don't think she'll be trying anything soon," Jax said, gesturing to the screen. "Looks like she's locked in the brig." "Let's hope she stays there," Vesper said, rubbing his temples. "And let's hope our alien friends don't have any more surprises in store." As the crew settled into their stations, there was a tentative sense of calm, the kind that always precedes a storm. The Serendipity was still limping through space, an old ship with a battered crew holding it together with spit and determination. But for now, they had a chance. A chance to turn the tables, to outsmart their adversaries and maybe, just maybe, survive this mess with their skins intact. Vesper looked at his crew, each one of them battered but resolute, and allowed himself a small, sardonic smile. "All right, folks. Let's show these aliens why humans are the most stubborn, bloody species in the galaxy." The Serendipity had seen better days, which was saying something because it had never seen a good day. The constant hum of the life support systems, the flickering lights overhead, and the occasional tremor running through the ship were all reminders that this rust bucket was one bad cough away from falling apart. Not that it was a surprise. When you buy a spaceship from a guy named Discount Dave's Cosmic Bargains, your expectations are lower than a snake's belly in a wagon rut. Vesper Thorne stood on the bridge, surveying the chaos around him. He looked like a man who had just realized his lottery ticket was a fake, disappointed but not entirely shocked. The screens before him displayed a mix of static and random alien symbols that looked like a toddler's attempt at modern art. They were surrounded by the kind of ominous glow that screamed impending doom. "Well, at least the damn thing's not playing elevator music," Vesper muttered, scratching the stubble on his chin. The last thing he needed was the universe serenading him to his doom with smooth jazz. Loxley was elbow-deep in the guts of the console, wires spilling out like the entrails of a particularly unlucky electronic beast. "If I had a credit for every time this ship tried to kill us, I'd buy a better ship," he grumbled, not looking up from his work. Jax, ever the optimist, was scanning through the ship's database with the gusto of a man desperately looking for a loophole in his divorce settlement. "Hey, Captain, any chance we can reason with the aliens? Offer them a drink? Maybe they just want a good time. They can have a good time somewhere else," Vesper replied, his voice dry as a Martian summer. "Preferably several light years from here." Zephyr Jet, the former navigator-turned-trader, was safely locked away in the brig, her smug grin a distant memory. But even behind bars, her betrayal lingered like the smell of bad fish in a tiny kitchen. It was the kind of betrayal that made you question everything, from your choice in friends to your life decisions. Especially if those decisions involved trusting someone who had backstabber practically tattooed on their forehead. Mina, meanwhile, was pacing the bridge like a caged tiger, her expression a mix of frustration and determination. "This whole place is practically falling apart," she said, throwing her arms up in exasperation. "It's like living in a haunted house but with less charm and more chances of sudden death." Vesper gave her a sidelong glance. "I thought you liked living dangerously. Not when dangerous involves explosive decompression," Mina shot back, her sarcasm cutting through the tension like a knife through butter. The ship shuddered beneath them, another reminder that they were dancing on the edge of oblivion. Vesper tried to focus on the task at hand, namely not dying. "All right, Loxley, give me something. Anything. Preferably something that doesn't end with us as space debris." Loxley pulled himself out of the console, looking like a man who just arm-wrestled with a bear and lived to tell the tale. "The alien tech is interfering with our systems on a level I didn't think was possible. It's like a virus, but designed by someone with a very twisted sense of humor." "Can you isolate it?" Jax asked, his fingers still flying over the keyboard like he was trying to win a prize for most spastic typist. "I'm working on it," Loxley replied, frustration etched into every syllable. "If I can just—" His words were cut off as the ship lurched violently, sending everyone staggering to keep their balance. "Can we not do that again?" Vesper said, righting himself with the grace of a drunken giraffe. "I'd like to keep my lunch where it is." Mina steadied herself against a console, her eyes narrowing. "This is getting bad, real bad. If we don't figure out how to stop this, we're gonna be space pancakes." "Yeah, and I prefer my pancakes not flattened by the cold, uncaring vacuum of space," Vesper muttered, glaring at the uncooperative screens. The alien symbols continued their mocking dance, a reminder of just how outmatched they were. "Captain," Jax said, a note of urgency in his voice, "I've found something. A signal. It's subtle, but it's there." A kind of beacon guiding the interference. Vesper's interest piqued, he moved closer to the console. "Can we trace it, find out where it's coming from? If I had more time, maybe," Jax said, his tone tinged with uncertainty. "But that's time we don't have." "Time's a luxury we're fresh out of," Vesper agreed, weighing their rapidly dwindling options. "And we've got more immediate problems. Like making sure Zephyr doesn't have any more tricks up her sleeve." "We've got her locked away," Mina pointed out, crossing her arms. "Can't do much from the brig, right?" "Depends," Vesper said, his voice grim. "She's slippery, and if she's in contact with whoever's pulling her strings, we're in more trouble than a politician caught with his hand in the cookie jar." The ship rocked again, and Vesper felt a fresh wave of frustration. It was like trying to herd cats on a trampoline. Nothing seemed to want to cooperate, and everything was threatening to go belly up at any moment. All right, he said, taking a deep breath. Loxley, keep working on those systems. Jack, see if you can trace that signal. Mina, you're with me. We're gonna have another chat with our favorite prisoner. Are you sure that's wise? Mina asked, raising an eyebrow. She's not exactly the cooperative type. I'm not looking for cooperation, Vesper replied, his voice hard and determined. I'm looking for answers, and if she's not willing to give them, well, we'll just have to get creative. As they left the bridge, the tension in the air was palpable, a living thing that clawed at the back of their minds. Vesper felt it like a weight on his shoulders, a reminder that they were fighting a battle on two fronts, with their own ship and the unseen enemy lurking in its systems. The walk to the brig was a silent one, the corridors empty save for the quiet hum of the ship. It was the kind of silence that whispered of pending disaster, of things not going according to plan. Vesper couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking a razor's edge, and one misstep would send them plummeting into chaos. As they reached the brig, the door slid open with a reluctant hiss, revealing Zephyr sitting on the cot with an unreadable expression. Her eyes flicked up to meet Vesper's, and for a moment he almost saw something akin to regret. Almost. "Captain," she said, her voice calm and collected. "Come to gloat." "Not in the mood for gloating," Vesper replied, stepping inside with Mina at his side. "I'm in the mood for answers." Zephyr leaned back, her hands resting calmly in her lap. "And what makes you think I have any?" "You're in contact with them, aren't you?" Vesper pressed, his tone firm. "The ones messing with our ship, the ones who want to see us dead." She regarded him with a cool gaze, her expression unreadable. "You make a lot of assumptions, Captain." "I make a lot of educated guesses," Vesper corrected, crossing his arms. "And right now I'm guessing that you have a way to communicate with them, a way to stop this madness before it gets us all killed." For a moment, Zephyr said nothing, her eyes searching his face for something. Then she smiled, a small, enigmatic curve of her lips. "Even if I did, why would I help you? Because you're stuck on the ship too," Mina said, her voice hard as steel. "And if it goes down, you go with it." Zephyr's smile widened, a touch of something dangerous in her eyes. "You're assuming I'm afraid of death." "Everyone's afraid of dying," Vesper said quietly. "Even those who pretend otherwise, so help us. Help us stop this before it's too late." There was a long, tense silence as Zephyr considered his words. The seconds stretched on, each one feeling like an eternity as they waited for her response. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft and laced with a hint of something that might have been sincerity. "There's a failsafe," she admitted, her gaze locked onto Vesper's. "A way to shut down the alien tech. But it won't be easy." "What do we need to do?" Vesper asked, hope tempered by caution. "The mainframe," Zephyr said, her eyes flicking to the door. "You'll need to access it directly, override the alien protocols, but it's risky. One wrong move and the whole system could collapse." "Risk is our business," Vesper replied, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "And we're fresh out of other options." "Then let's not waste any more time," Mina said, her voice filled with determination. "We've got a ship to save." As they left the brig, Vesper couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into yet another trap, but hope, however fragile, had a way of lighting the darkest paths. And as they made their way to the mainframe, he could only hope that this time, luck, and maybe a bit of ingenuity, would be on their side. The Serendipity's bridge was buzzing with the type of nervous energy usually reserved for funeral parlors and dentist waiting rooms. Loxley was elbow-deep in circuitry, his mismatched eyes flicking between the mess of wires and the screen that displayed an ominous array of alien symbols. It was the kind of display that made one yearn for the simple terror of a tax audit. "Well, what have you got, miracle worker?" Vesper asked, trying to keep his tone light but failing miserably. Desperation was an uninvited guest clutching his coattails. "Let's call it a brainchild of necessity," Loxley muttered, his focus unyielding. "This alien tech is like a clingy ex, always interfering, never taking no for an answer. Can we ghost it?" Jax piped up from the corner, optimistic as ever. "Maybe we block its number, change our status to ships in other galaxies." Loxley snorted. "If only. but I've found a weak spot. A way to override their signal, essentially hijack their own interference. That sounds like it's going to end poorly, Mina said, arms crossed, skepticism practically oozing from her pores. Like asking for a favor from a lone shark. True, Loxley agreed, but it's our only shot. We need to redirect their signal into our systems, then overload it. Give them a taste of their own medicine. Vesper gave a low whistle. You mean to fry them with their own juice? Damn, Lox, that's devious. Loxley shrugged, a ghost of a grin tugging at his lips. Necessity breeds ingenuity or insanity, sometimes both. So what's the catch? Mina asked, always the practical one. There's always a catch. I'll need to access the mainframe directly, Loxley said, rubbing the back of his neck, and hold the connection open manually while you reroute the power. It'll be like holding onto a live wire and hoping it doesn't bite back too hard. Sounds like a job for a masochist, Jack said with a grim chuckle. Or someone with no better options, Loxley replied, his smile forced but bravely sardonic. Vesper nodded, his mind racing through the implications. How long will it take? Not long once I'm in place, Loxley replied. But someone's gonna have to make sure Zephyr doesn't pull any new tricks. We can't afford distractions. Mina scowled. I'll babysit the brig. If she so much as twitches wrong, I'll personally remind her why you don't screw with the Serendipity. Good, Vesper said. Jax, you'll need to reroute the power while Loxley's playing with the alien hardware. Think you can handle it? Piece of cake, Jax said, confidence masking the nervousness lurking beneath. Or more like a fruitcake, heavy, dense, and likely to cause indigestion. We need this to go right, Vesper asserted, eyeing his crew. No room for screw-ups. We get one shot to turn this around. They nodded in unison, the gravity of the situation settling over them like a shroud. It was the kind of moment that tested bonds, that defined the measure of a crew. The Serendipity might be a rust bucket, but it was their rust bucket, and they'd be damned if they'd let some alien tech turn them into cosmic dust. As they set their plan into motion, the ship groaned under an unseen weight, a testament to its years of service. Vesper could almost hear the echoes of past adventures whispering through its corridors. Despite its dilapidation, the Serendipity had always managed to pull through, somehow. Loxley, tools in hand, made his way towards the mainframe access, mumbling to himself like a mad scientist. He was the kind of guy who could turn a paperclip and some duct tape into a death ray if given enough time. Too bad time was the one thing they didn't have. Meanwhile, Mina headed towards the brig, her posture radiating a kind of simmering annoyance that could melt through bulkheads. She was half tempted to use Zephyr as a punching bag, but that would require paperwork, a fate worse than death. Inside the brig, Zephyr sat with an air of infuriating calm, as if being imprisoned was merely a minor inconvenience. Her eyes flicked up as Mina entered, a smirk playing on her lips. Come to check if I've redecorated, Zephyr asked, her tone dripping with irony. Just making sure you're still breathing. Unfortunately, Mina replied, her voice steady. We wouldn't want you to miss the fireworks. Zephyr's smirk widened, a shark in human skin. I do love a good show. Back at the mainframe, Loxley was elbow-deep in wires, cursing under his breath as sparks flew. Come on, you blasted piece of junk, he muttered, more to himself than the ship. Work with me here. The mainframe was a relic, much like the rest of the ship. It was amazing it hadn't given up the ghost years ago. But Loxley had a way with machines, a knack for coaxing life from them where others saw only scrap. Vesper hovered nearby, a silent sentinel, his eyes never leaving the console. He could almost feel the tension in the air, like a coiled spring ready to snap. He wasn't a religious man, but he was tempted to start praying to any deity willing to listen. Jax, meanwhile, was dancing between consoles, his fingers flying over the keys with a kind of manic energy. Rerouting power now, he called out, his voice strained but focused. Hope you're ready, Lox. Just about, Loxley replied, his focus unyielding. Keep it steady, Jax. We don't want to blow the whole system. No pressure, Jax muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. Just the fate of all our sorry hides. As the seconds ticked by, Vesper felt the weight of those moments pressing down on him, a reminder of just how close they were to disaster. But beneath the anxiety there was a flicker of hope, a stubborn flame that refused to be snuffed out. "We're live," Loxley called out, his voice loud in the stillness. "Now or never, Captain," Vesper nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. "Do it." With a final adjustment, Loxley bridged the connection, the ship shuddering as the alien tech fought back. It was like playing chess with a psychopath, one wrong move and they'd all be toast. But the Serendipity held firm, her systems enduring the onslaught as they fought to reclaim control. Vesper could almost feel the ship's defiance, a testament to years of stubborn survival. "Come on, you old hunk of junk," Vesper whispered, willing the ship to hold together. "Just a little longer." Jax was a blur of motion, his hands a blur as he manipulated the consoles, forcing the alien signal back on itself. It was a dangerous dance, one that could end in ruin if they weren't careful. And then with a final, wrenching heave the ship lurched, the alien symbols flickering and fading from the screens. For a heartbeat there was silence, a silence so profound it was almost deafening. Then the lights flickered back on, steady and reassuring, the hum of the ship's systems a sweet symphony of survival. They had done it. Against all odds they had turned the tables on their otherworldly foes. Vesper let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, a grin breaking across his face. "We're clear," he said, his voice a mixture of relief and disbelief. Loxley sagged against the console, exhaustion etched into his features. "Told you it'd work," he said, a tired but triumphant smile on his lips. Mina's voice crackled over the comms. "Zepha's still in her cage. Looks like she'll miss the encore." Jax pumped a fist in the air, whooping with joy. "Take that, you alien bastards," Vesper chuckled, shaking his head. "Let's not get too cocky. We've still got a long way to go." But for the first time in what felt like an eternity, there was hope. Hope that they might just make it through this mess in one piece. Hope that the Serendipity had a few more adventures left in her. As the crew regrouped on the bridge, Vesper couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. They were a ragtag bunch, held together by duct tape and a prayer, but they were his ragtag bunch. And damn it if they weren't the best crew he could have asked for. "All right, folks," he said, his voice steady and filled with a renewed sense of purpose. "Let's get everything shipshape and figure out our next move. We're not out of the woods yet, but we're one step closer." The crew nodded, determination in their eyes. They'd been through hell and back, but they were still standing. And as long as they had breath in their lungs and a ship under their feet, they'd keep fighting, because that's what humans did. They survived, they adapted, and they overcame no matter the odds. The Serendipity might not have been the best ship in the universe, but it was home. And for Vesper and his crew, that was more than enough. Vesper leaned back in the captain's chair, staring at the remnants of chaos flickering on the bridge's aging monitors. The Serendipity had just won a round against an enemy they hadn't even known existed a few weeks ago. Human ingenuity versus alien tech. It was one for the history books, or at least the kind of story you'd tell over a pint in the grimiest bar on Luna Station. "Well, that was a hell of a tango," Vesper said, breaking the silence that had settled over the crew. "And to think, I was worried we'd never dance again after that last fiasco with Discount Dave's cosmic bargains." "Next time, maybe we skip the bargain bin," Jax suggested, still flush with the adrenaline of their victory. "I'd prefer not to play chess with E.T. Angry Cousin again." Loxley wiped a smear of grease from his cheek, his mismatched eyes reflecting the glow of the monitor. "Problem is, Jax, I'm pretty sure the universe only has a bargain bin. Everything's dodgy, especially when it comes with a no-returns policy." Mina tapped her foot impatiently, arms crossed. "Enough chit-chat. We've got bigger problems, like the fact that Zepha's still breathing our air." Vesper nodded, the grin slipping from his face like an ill-fitting mask. "Right, that snake in the brig. I suppose we need to decide what to do with her before she decides what to do with us." Jax leaned against a console, grinning like a kid who'd just found a cache of contraband sweets. "We could always jettison her." I hear space is real peaceful this time of year. Unfortunately, even spaceships have lawyers now, Mina said dryly, and I'd rather not end up on trial for dumping human refuse in space. The mention of lawyers drew groans from the crew. Space laws were as convoluted as Discount Dave's return policies, and none of them wanted to get tangled in that particular web. Best keep her under lock and key until we figure out our next move, Vesper said, and pray she doesn't sprout any more ideas about world orders or whatever nonsense she's been peddling. Mina's eyes narrowed. I should have smacked more sense into her when I had the chance, and miss out on our current predicament, Jax quipped. Where's your sense of adventure, Mina? She rolled her eyes. Adventure. Is that what we're calling our slow crawl to inevitable doom? Pretty much, Loxley chimed in, with a grin that suggested he'd have it no other way. Vesper's fingers drummed on his armrest, eyes scanning the bridge as if answers might materialize out of the ether. All right, folks, let's regroup. First, we need to figure out what these alien buddies of Ior's were doing hijacking our systems in the first place. Loxley nodded. The interference was definitely intentional, felt like someone trying to guide us somewhere, and not exactly a welcoming committee if you catch my drift. Great, Mina said. So we're a cosmic Uber, but instead of riders, we've got interstellar stalkers. Vesper gave a weary chuckle. And here I was thinking we were special. Jax took a bite out of a protein bar, crumbs cascading onto the console, and shrugged. Special in the way a three-legged dog is special, maybe. The bridge lights flickered momentarily, a reminder that the Serendipity wasn't quite out of the woods. If anything, it had simply found a bigger, darker forest to get lost in. But they'd crossed one hurdle. Now it was time to tackle the next. Zepha's our key, Vesper said, his tone shifting to the serious one he reserved for when things were truly dire. Whatever she knows, we need to get it out of her, nicely if possible. And if she doesn't want to play nice, Mina asked, her skepticism a constant companion. Then we convince her, Vesper replied, a hard edge to his voice. By any means necessary. Loxley twitched, a nervous tic that seemed to surface whenever negotiations were on the table. You're not planning anything too drastic, are you, Captain? Vesper gave him a sidelong glance. Drastic is my middle name. Well, technically it's Eugene, but you get the idea. Mina let out a snort. Well, Eugene, let's see if the Queen of Treachery is feeling chatty. With a nod, Vesper rose and led the way toward the brig, the metal floors echoing beneath their boots. Each step felt heavier, as if the weight of their predicament was physically dragging them down. None of them spoke much. With Zephyr involved, words tended to be more ammunition than communication. They reached the brig, and the door hissed open. Zephyr was lounging on the bunk, looking as comfortable as if she'd booked a suite on a luxury liner. Her eyes glinted with a dangerous intelligence, the kind that could slice through intentions like a hot knife through synthetic butter. Long time no see, Vesper said, leaning against the door frame with a casualness he didn't quite feel. Zephyr's smile was more of a baring of teeth. I was beginning to think you'd forgotten about me. Impossible, Jax said with a grin. You're like a rash. Can't ignore you even if we wanted to. Her eyes shifted to Jax, unimpressed. Charming as ever, Jax, I see you're still the comic relief around here. And you're still the antagonist, he shot back. Good to see some things never change. Vesper cleared his throat. As much as I love witty banter, we're here for answers, Zephyr. Why the interference? What's the endgame? Zephyr leaned back, her expression one of mock innocence. Endgame? Oh, Vesper, you wound me. I thought we'd moved past such conspiracy theories. Mina crossed her arms, glaring daggers. Cut the crap, Zephyr. We all know you're up to something. Spill it or I'll spill you. Zephyr's eyebrows rose. Such hostility. I'm merely a victim in all this. Victim my ass, Mina snapped. Last I checked, you're the one who sold us out to the highest bidder. Zephyr's smile faltered slightly, a crack in the veneer. Fine, you want the truth. I wanted to see who was playing puppet master. Turns out there are bigger forces at play. Some of our alien friends have been getting cozy with humans in high places. Jax's eyebrows disappeared into his hairline. Are you saying there's an alien conspiracy inside the UN? Zephyr shrugged. Not just the UN, they're everywhere, like roaches that know how to work the toaster. Vesper exhaled slowly. So what were you planning to do with that information? Start a revolution? Revolution, Zephyr laughed, a harsh sound that bounced off the metal walls. No, I plan to survive. By any means necessary. Mina shook her head, disgust etched into her features. You'd sell your own mother to survive, wouldn't you? Zephyr met Mina's gaze, unflinching. Wouldn't you? The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken truths. Zephyr might have been a traitor, but she spoke to a primal instinct that lurked in all of them, the will to survive no matter the cost. So, what now? Loxley asked, his voice hesitant. Do we take this information and run? Vesper considered the question, his mind racing. Running only works for so long. Eventually, you run out of places to hide. He glanced at Zephyr, an idea forming. No, we need to reveal the truth. Expose those bastards inside the UN and whoever else they're puppeteering. Zephyr's expression shifted, the gears in her mind clearly turning. And how do you plan to do that? Vesper straightened, determination igniting in his eyes. By turning their own game against them. We've got the tech and now we've got the knowledge. Let's see how they handle a dose of humanity's finest chaos. Jax chuckled, the sound dark and full of mischief. I always knew saving the galaxy would be part of my resume. Didn't think it'd be so. Hands-on, though, Mina sighed, shaking her head with a resigned smile. I guess this means we're doing this then. Vesper nodded, the weight of his decision settling comfortably on his shoulders. This was the kind of fight he could get behind, the kind of fight that mattered. All right, he said, his voice strong, let's gear up. We're going to need every trick in the book. And maybe a few new ones. The crew dispersed, a renewed sense of purpose driving their steps. They were headed for a confrontation that would test everything they were, everything they believed in. But they were ready. As the door to the brig closed behind them, Zephyr called out, her voice laced with something almost like admiration. Good luck, Captain. You'll need it. Vesper paused, looking back at her with a wry smile. Luck's for amateurs, Zephyr. We've got something better. And what's that? She asked, curiosity piqued. Cunning, Vesper replied, and just enough stupidity to make it all interesting. With that, the crew of the Serendipity set out to do what humans did best. Improvise, adapt, and throw a cosmic wrench into the finely tuned machine of destiny. If the aliens thought they could manipulate humanity like chess pieces, they were about to learn that humans didn't play by the rules. And as Vesper and his crew prepared for the storm ahead, one thing was certain. Whatever happened next, it wouldn't be dull. Not by a long shot. The Serendipity drifted aimlessly in the aftermath of what could generously be described as an exercise in cosmic absurdity. If the universe was a comedy, then Vesper Thorn and his motley crew were the punchline. But they laughed anyway, because what else could you do when faced with the galaxy's cruel sense of humor? The bridge was a mess of sparks and smoke, as if someone had taken a blender to a hardware store and hit puree. Vesper stood amidst it all, the ship's captain in name and resigned acceptance, surveying the chaos he'd somehow managed to not only survive but supposedly win. Guess we showed those aliens how humans do things, huh? Jax said, leaning against a console that was doing a fine impersonation of a fireworks display. Yeah, Vesper replied with a crooked smirk, with all the grace of a drunken elephant on roller skates. Mina was nursing a gash on her arm, blood oozing through her fingers as she applied a bandage. Could have gone worse, she grunted. Could have died, then where'd we be? Floating around as cosmic confetti, Loxley emerged from beneath the console, oil smeared across his cheek like war paint. Well, at least we'd have been festive. Is this what heroism feels like? Vesper mused aloud, scratching at the stubble on his chin. Because it kind of feels like crap. The crew chuckled, though it was the kind of laughter that had no humor, just the relief of still being alive. The Serendipity had taken a beating, sure, but so had their alien adversaries. The crew had pulled off the impossible, used the alien tech against its creators, turning the tables in a way only humans could. with a mixture of desperation and reckless ingenuity. "So, what's next, Captain?" Jax asked, eyes glinting with mischief. "Saving the galaxy Part 2. Maybe find a planet with a beach." "Well, we could," Vesper scratched his head, "but I was thinking maybe the next adventure could involve less imminent death." Zepha's voice crackled over the intercom, the prisoner turned informant having earned her place back on the bridge after proving semi-useful. "You know, there are other alien factions out there. Maybe they are less hostile." Mina rolled her eyes. "Because making new alien friends has worked out so well for us so far. Who knew peace treaties could be signed with a side of laser fire?" Loxley quipped, wiping his hands on his already filthy jumpsuit. "Yeah," Vesper sighed, "but if we don't at least try to make a difference, then we're just treading water. Or vacuum," Jax added helpfully. "Right, vacuum," Vesper conceded. "Point is, we're good at this. Maybe not textbook good, more like accidental genius good." The Serendipity hummed a low, constant drone, a reminder that it was still functional barely. It was a ship held together by duct tape, hope, and Loxley's uncanny engineering skills. But it was theirs, and they'd be damned if they let anyone take it from them. "So, what's the plan?" Mina asked, bandage secure, determination set in her eyes. Vesper looked around at his crew, a ragtag group of misfits who'd somehow become family. "We make sure the rest of the galaxy knows what happened here. We take this story to Luna Station, let it spread. And in the meantime, we see if we can track down any more of these alien conspirators." "And when we find them?" Jax asked. "Well," Vesper replied with a grin, "we'll do what we do best. Improvise." Loxley chuckled, a sound full of camaraderie and shared madness. "Yeah, that's been working out so well." Zepha's voice, now definitely more friend than foe, chimed in. "And what about me? Still planning on jettisoning me?" Vesper shook his head, though he knew she couldn't see it. "Nah, we'll keep you around. You're handy with a secret or two, and we might need that cunning of yours." There was a pause then. "I'm touched, really," Zephyr replied, and for once it almost sounded genuine. The crew busied themselves with the aftermath, sorting through debris and patching up systems. It was the kind of work that was endless and mind-numbing, but it was routine, and routine was comforting in its own way. As he worked, Vesper pondered the weight of their actions. They were being hailed as heroes, but he knew better. They were survivors, and sometimes that was enough. Sometimes that was all that mattered. The ship's comm system crackled to life. This time it was a transmission from Luna Station, their signal bouncing through the void like a deranged pinball. "Serendipity, this is Luna Control. We've received your data dump." "Quite the story you've got there." "Yeah, we aim to entertain," Vesper replied, his tone nonchalant. "We figured it was worth sharing before someone tried to bury it." "Well, you've certainly got everyone's attention, and possibly a few bounties on your heads," came the dry response. "Great," Jax muttered, "more friends." "We'll deal with those later," Mina said, dismissive of the threat. "First, let's make sure the truth gets out," Vesper told Luna Control. "Let them know what they're dealing with." "Consider it done," Luna Control replied. "And Serendipity, good luck out there." "We don't need luck," Vesper said, echoing his earlier sentiment. "We've got cunning." The transmission ended, leaving the crew in silence. It was a silence filled with possibilities, the kind that stretched out into the vast unknown and dared them to follow. "Feels like the end of an era," Loxley said, his voice tinged with something like nostalgia. Vesper nodded. "Yeah, but it's the start of a new one too. Who knows what we'll find out there?" "Hopefully a planet with breathable air and no homicidal maniacs," Mina said. Jax chuckled. "I'd settle for a decent meal and a fresh pair of socks." The Serendipity was ready as she'd ever be, to launch into the next chapter of their journey. They'd face down unimaginable odds and come out the other side not just intact, but stronger. "All right," Vesper said, a renewed sense of purpose in his voice. "Let's get this old girl moving again. We've got worlds to explore, mysteries to unravel, and probably more trouble to find," Jax added, ever the realist. "Wouldn't have it any other way," Vesper said with a grin. As they prepared for departure, the crew felt the weight of their choices and the promise of what lay ahead. They were bound by shared experiences and the unyielding desire to defy the odds. Zephyr summed it up best over the intercom, her voice carrying a note of wry appreciation. "You know, for a bunch of space cowboys, you're not half bad." Vesper laughed, the sound genuine and full of life. "Thanks, Zephyr. Coming from you, that's high praise." And with that, the Serendipity roared to life, engines rumbling with a defiance that matched its crew. They turned their eyes to the stars, ready to face whatever challenges came next, because in the end it wasn't about being heroes. It was about surviving, thriving, and maybe, just maybe, making a difference. And if they could do it with a bit of flair, all the better. As the ship jumped to FTL, leaving the wreckage of their latest escapade behind, one thing was certain: the galaxy was in for a hell of a show. The Serendipity was coming, and this time they had a plan, or at least the semblance of one. And that was enough for now.